of your members, and also the definition you provided regarding small-scale farmers vis-a-vis what you have also termed established farmers. Because truth be told, in South Africa, we're grappling with the inequalities that were presented by apartheid, and that's the reality of our country. It's 30 years into democracy. When you talk about farming, it's clear that we don't have a number of black farmers. One of the people that came to present here, who was from Limpopo, he gave us a number of things that he thinks should be done. But he says the support is not there. And that's the reality of our country. So if you put in the human rights lens, which says to you, let's go to the Constitution that says that we are all equal before the law. There should be no discrimination. The fact that we are all supposed to enjoy dignity. And if you even go to the principle that a number of government sectors go by, the Batupile principle, Ubuntu being at the center of it, then it is important for us to understand that as for Agri-SA, who are you really representing? Who are your members? In order for us to understand if there is room enough created for black farmers to occupy that space as well. Because from what you have been saying, I don't really see how an enabling ground has been created for that. And not just black farmers, the marginalized, the women, persons with disabilities, older persons that are of the view that ageism should not be applied to them. Saying we still want to be able to contribute economically in terms of into our country or into the spectrum of farming. So are those voices also amplified? So while you talk to demographics, I also you then speak to these categories and say, this is where they are located, the youth. You actually, you made a very profound statement to say, in fact, your father is the one who instilled this into you. And I'm thinking you probably also drumming it into your children. You spoke about a daughter, in fact. I think you said something about your daughter, which is a very good thing because you said farming is generational. And that's a great statement. But equally, whilst this could be located in families, we need to be able to come out and also open this space for others that would like to also enjoy these same rights that during apartheid time, they were only enjoyed by the few in the country. And we still see that the land, and that's what the minister even said, even yesterday, that the land is still not in the hands of the majority of our country. We still have the selected few. And I think you said the same thing in terms of occupation. In fact, I had written something on it to say, the numbers that you gave in terms of where you are located. And you said there's a farmer everywhere. But who are these farmers? That question becomes very important. Can I pause there, Chairperson? Chairperson is saying, those are all my questions. I suppose maybe I just need to look at what else did I say then. I think this can also just accommodate it. Just the the reason behind access, you said, infrastructure, the road and so forth. But access for me, it's also more than that. Who is occupying those spaces? There are farmers, ladies that testified. They're saying to us, it's very difficult to be in the farming space. In fact, there are periods when there's no income. And I would like you to please speak to that. That what are interventions that you are doing as Agri-SA to ensure that during those periods, during those seasons, when they are not able to earn an income, what interventions do you have in place? And children have to travel hours on end to schools. Years ago, I don't know if you know this, most of the farmers would have ensured that there was even a school in that farm, and which were funded by government. Children did not have to then travel very far in unsafe spaces. They were able to be accommodated. And some of the schools, they would have been known that this is a school belonging to Van Merwe. And he will be providing everything. And there'll be one or two teachers. But the beauty of it was that children were being accommodated. Their right to education was being realized. Do you perhaps know about that? And if you don't, then suppose something maybe that you can go into and look into it, that how do we ensure that these very farms where we are, so that we don't have too many people going into urban areas, how do we make sure that the environment accommodates all the needs, persons with disabilities, the type of schools that we have? We've got children that suffer from autism, but most of them have to move into urban areas because there's only just one school. And I'm thinking about Northern Cape in Kimberley. So how are we ensuring that there's that contribution from the farming industry? Because you are making so much from the land itself, and it will make sense to equally contribute. I don't know if you also are located in the IDP of the municipalities as farmers. Do you also have that agreement? Maybe the minister doesn't exist with the municipalities where you say, this is how we can contribute in order for communities to benefit from what farmers are already benefiting from, which is the land, the natural resources, but also just giving back. Thank you, Chair. And if you can't answer this question, it's okay. There'll still be other questions that I've already drafted. Thank you.
You may also comment in terms of the comments and the questions from Commissioner Guinan. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of questions and comments, so I need to find my way through the path that you kind of described to us. Maybe just on the schooling, ma'am. My father was just a humble man. He built 2 schools on his farms. He paid for it, ma'am, no government. That was an apartheid's era. What I want to say about that, ma'am, if you have a look on what we have in South Africa today, we still have farming schools, ma'am, funded by farmers. If you go into the Western Cape and you go and sit down in little communities, you will find the contribution of local people contributing into the system without structure. What I mean by that is without going through the government structure in dealing with it. So I think what you mentioned is there's a spontaneous way of many of the things happening in South Africa not being documented, not being stated. And I think there's, beyond the time that we were in, a lot of goodwill amongst good people in South Africa without being put into a race category and being referred back to where we were. And I think One of the things that we try to do, I want to get back to, are we measuring it? No, ma'am. I don't measure a farmer being a lady or a man. And I don't measure a farmer being black or white. I don't measure a farmer being small or large. And I can tell you why. I don't want to be intimidated. Not by my history, not by what was wrong in the past. And that doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge the wrong of the past. But it does mean that I have a great focus on agriculture in South Africa. And I want to come back to it, what I meant when I started. Agriculture is all about risks. And ma'am, if that lady is white and she's farming and she doesn't have an income, there's nothing opening up because of her color. She's a farmer. And it is true there's no income. There's some periods in time where they only receive once a year that income. And if you can recall, when I went back to the definition of farming, I said we need to understand the risk. Farming is all about the risk. And if we go back in our history, it might be that the previous governments then anticipated risk different for farmers and intervened to help them with risks. Can we just do the same again, ma'am? So one of the biggest issues we need to deal with agriculture is organic growth in agriculture. Because with the capacity we have today, we will not be able to feed 10 billion people in South Africa, in the world, let alone the 1 billion people that's going to be added to Africa, of which we export 50% of our exports into Africa. And South Africa has at its limits. So what do we need to do? We need to grow agriculture organically. There's 2.5 million hectares with government that does not produce any food. And my mind is that's where we need to go. We need to make sure that we can grow that. I can tell you what is our greatest concern as Agri-SA. We define people again about race, where we come from, how do I do life? And you know what we do? We forgot about the risks. Those farmers are going to be put into places where they will not be able to bear the risk. And we don't define the risk. So, if I may, the reason why we don't define is not because we do not acknowledge our past. Ma'am, I'm white. I'm speaking Afrikaans. I grew up Afrikaans. I battled to speak English. I need to think all the mannetjies in my head need to go for English. I'm so proud to be South African. I'm so proud to be part of this country. And I do not walk away from my past. But what I do embrace is the future that we have. And what I do see as somebody playing a part, a small part, in what needs to be for South Africa. As a farmer, I need to say to you, ma'am, whatever we do, it should not be based other than mitigate the risk of that farmers. Which gender is involved? Which color is involved? I don't get away from that. But the foremost thing we need to go to is mitigating risk. We failed so many people in the past 30 years by giving them land without assistance. If I didn't have a father being a farmer, ma'am, I won't be able to sit here. Why? Because he impounded it into my mind, into my head. I drink, I sleep, I eat what I do. Why? And that's what I meant by generational. Now we want to pull people in, not knowing of all the risks that's going to come. That's natural in my mind. I know that cattle can only birth once a year. So you're not going to have two incomes. It's once a year. I know when to stagger it. Why? Because I have a father who taught me that. Now we want to put people into places, make them successful, but let go. And do you understand that I'm an advocate of managing the risk of farmers and small-scale people, and it depends on where they live and with what they farm, have different needs to mitigate that risk. We fail them as South Africa if we just give them a piece of land. We also fail them if we don't give them land. But the uttermost part is we fail them if I categorize people and not looking into the risk of being a farmer in South Africa. That same risk goes for all the colors, goes for all the people, all the genders, but we don't define that risk. And that's why we don't define in our membership anything regarding that with no other reason. Because agriculture belongs to people who live in this land and working with their hands in soil and live from that soil and produce from that soil for the benefit of South Africa. So I'm just worried that you're going to think that as being a commercial farmers union for 122 years, I'm stuck in my mind that there's only one species that lives, that's the commercial farmer in South Africa. In our minds, there's only one species that lives. It's the farmer of South Africa. And that's defined not by color. That's not defined even by our history. It's defined by who are the people that need to produce food in South Africa.
Thank you for those submissions. What I'm saying to you is that your father created that enabling space. And that is why you are where you are. Now, equally, someone else who was on their father was only a cleaner in a house owned by a farmer. Their children as well, they aspire to also occupy that very space. And that's what I want to speak to. That as Agri-SA, how do you then create that space? How do you make sure that they also have that opportunity? It's good enough to talk about their risk and all that. Yes, any business is, in fact, from where I'm sitting, I'm sure accountants will tell us, and auditors, they will tell you that there are risks in any business. Doesn't matter what type of business you're doing, because you don't know what tomorrow holds. COVID-19, if anything, taught us a lot. So you have to be better prepared as any type of business. So if there are such interventions, that's what I would want you to at least maybe give us that. And even to say you're being intentional about this. We can't deny that apartheid denied Black people opportunities to be able to occupy certain areas in terms of work, in terms of professions. We can't deny that. And that is why we ask this question, so that you are intentional in how you want to change the spectrum. You can't change the spectrum if you're going to put us all in one basket. Because clearly you are not being intentional, you're not being deliberate in how you're ensuring that even that person, it's like saying people that are in rural areas, they are similar to those that are in urban areas. That's not the truth. When I go around the province, one thing that I've realized is that I can't compare a situation in Gauteng vis-a-vis a situation in Northwest. I get to Northwest, children are put in a classroom where there are 78 in number. And they're expected to all learn at the same time. There's no water. They still have pit toilets. If they are built, they are not built in accordance with the standard. Those are the issues that we are grappling with. So we can't close our eyes to that. And that's when we really need to say to members of Agri-SA, how are you ensuring that you bring somebody along? You don't leave them behind. Because from what you're saying, you are definitely leaving them behind. If you're going to say, no, you're a farmer, therefore you're fine. The challenges are not the same. You said it yourself. I'm not even sure it's you. No. I think it's not you. Grand SA said, they go to Mpumalanga and they assist them in Mpumalanga. Why? Because certain foods can be grown on that soil. Now, if we take your motto, which is you accept everyone as they are, it doesn't make sense. And I'm happy you spoke about these schools were being built by farmers. Thank you for that information. But also they were supporting them. It was not just the building. They went as far as even paying the salaries. in some of those schools. The departments were not involved. We come from a very different era altogether. But I can tell you now, in Base Plus, in Western Cape, those children are forced, and these are like 6-year-old, 7-year-old, they are forced to stay at that school. They can't be ferried to their homes. Those are type of situations that we are grappling with. But if there is maybe a strategy of some sort that Agria is saying, our members, you make 100%, take 10%, 50%, put it in schools, put it in hospitals, put it towards the infrastructure. That's what we're trying to find out. If you've got things like that, and of course, if it's there, then at least let it be tabled and let it be provided. It would be very sad to say it's sporadic here, there. That is very sad to hear that they could be happening in that format. But if they're available, please, through you, Madam Chair, may they be provided. They will assist us a lot because, it will show that the community you and I belong to, we all care about them. But most importantly, we also want to, contribute towards their well-being. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like perhaps to comment, or would you propose a written submission?
No, I think the comment is, I'd rather comment than put a submission in. I think the comment is, maybe you missed my heart by saying that, and it's not generalizing, by putting everybody into the space of, well, we all have risk. I think you missed my heart. I think you missed the point in what I stated. I said the following. I said, if you're a white farmer and you plant maize in Mpumalanga and you farm next to the other guy who's a black farmer, because of our past, we think the risks are different. And I'm talking about people the same size. I don't disagree to what you say, and the schools that you mentioned and that you spoke about, that schools are still maintained by farmers. But ma'am, I think something did happen. That same people that stayed on the farm are going to the schools in town now, which they didn't have in the past. So there's a lot of play in this. So just on the basis of why the classification for us is different, is not to deny it, not to put it away, not at all. I understand exactly what you're talking about. But the moment that you start to focus on how do I mitigate the risk of that small scale farm, and I can use Grains SA. They have a brilliant program. So they remember with us. So all the industries that are members are adding a lot of value. We're going to bring out a report now, and I might supply you with a report on specifically development in agriculture and the money that we put and the structures that we put in place. But what we've seen with this is we miss the risk of people, and specifically women living in rural areas. And then you define that woman in rural areas, but it's defined about the risk that she needs to overcome. And how do we speak into that risk? So it's not to shy away, it's not to walk away. I think the best would be to submit the report to you. It's going to be public anyhow. The report, I would submit the report to you in showing you the actions that we have as organized agriculture to participate exactly in what you say. If I go back to the risk, and that's what we are so worried about. We have this nuance in our minds to say people don't have land, so they don't have access. Now we give them land without support. My father gave me support, ma'am. Where are the structures? So if I go back and I sit down with Minister Nyonsu and deal regarding the matter, I say to him, sir, I'm a South African and I'm concerned because the land that we are going to give to people that farm, they never grew up as me, being a farmer boy, woke up 3 o'clock in the morning to understand this world. You're unfair. How can we intervene and help? How can we help those people? And that is the risks that we need to deal with, of which the risks that you spoke about is evident, ma'am. And I think we need to speak into that. But my heart is we fail our own people in South Africa. We fail our black people who came from being a janitor and has the opportunity to be one of the best farmers in the world because we never supported
Thank you.
them.
See, there's a request that we have a quick stretch break. Can we just have a quick stretch break for 5 minutes? I know that you have been with us for a while, but I think your conversations, you have actually incited us to have more conversations. But can we just have a quick comfort break? We'll be back at 1:10. As the focal area. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on record. We have Commissioner Ntulu who has her questions, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair of the Inquiry. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for engaging us. Many of my questions have been answered, but there are some clarity-seeking questions. And perhaps in the backdrop of your engagement with Commissioner Kwinana, I'd like to ask clarity-seeking questions in the form of more direct questions, and I'd appreciate more direct answers. As the South African Human Rights Commission, we are also in business, but we are in the business of transformation. And that requires us to be aware of the politics of the pre-1994 era and the governance system in order for us to assist in the transformation project which is envisaged by the Constitution. The lawyer for Agri SA did also indicate that Agri SA submits itself to the constitutional framework, which constitutional framework then centers the notion of transformation. Given your responses around politics and an intention to avoid the politics of race and gender, what is your understanding of transformation? And equally, what do you understand as your role in the constitutional transformation project?
I need to think. So firstly, the definition of transformation for us is we're not fit for purpose where we are and what we need to do, and we need to transform to adapt to this new world that we are in and this new requirement that we are in. And that requirement, as you rightly said, came out of our history and where we learn what was done previously and what wasn't right shouldn't be there. And I think you mentioned it again. The reason why we don't want to focus on politics is because we're farmers. And my business is farming, ma'am, it's not politics, although I can't escape politics because we live in a world full of politics. But transformation is a concept where you need to go from one level to a next level. And I think if there's one thing that we did state, is that Agri-SA is for transformation. I think we also submitted that in our writing to say that we are there and we do submit for transformation. I think one thing that is debatable, which I hear you talk about, is what should be the contribution of farmers towards transformation. And I think that's a very long discussion because, again, I defined rightly on the risks that people deal with when they are in agriculture. So somebody being a farmer on a 10,000 hectare, farming with 1,000 ewes, turnover might be 1 million a year. If you deduct all the costs, there might be left an owner's salary of maybe 150,000 a year. What do you expect from that farmer to be in transformation? So I think, if I may, again, we also bring out a report of transformation and the contribution and the I would say, the initiatives that we take as organized agriculture, and then specifically the grouping that I spoke about being the commodities, in what is our contribution to transformation. That report is coming out now, and I will do that as a submission to you.
Thank you so much, CEO. We appreciate that. Given that your understanding of the definition of transformation, particularly in the current context, and to quote you, we are not fit for purpose. Are you able to clarify what are the indicators that define what not being fit for purpose is? And I'm asking this as a follow-up in order to get a sense of your own appreciation of the role of Agri-SA in then addressing these indicators that define us as not fit for purpose.
I think what you mentioned about fit for purpose is, you asked me what is my understanding of transformation. And I said by fit for purpose, I meant by transformation means that we need to go to a higher level because the business environment changed to such an extent that we're not fit for purpose for this business environment. And where do we need to go to? So transformation, we made it a political concept by black and white. That's what transformation means. It's far greater than that now in my mind as a farmer.
No, thank you. I appreciate that response. Now, going back again to the very important engagement you've had with Commissioner Kwinana, I'd like again to be a little bit more direct. The apartheid government, out of all the industries that it supported the agricultural industry the most. Through capital, through marketing, through education, through infrastructure, through subsidies, and of course, land dispossession of the majority to benefit the majority. So when we speak about an example of scale, a farmer having 200 hectares, it's not a question of business. It's a question of history, and it's a question of how did that farmer obtain that 100 hectares? And that's a question of the politics of agriculture and the politics of history. So when you proudly tell us that your father built 2 schools it's not a question of your father's hard work. There's a direct relationship between the support that the apartheid government provided to the minority in this country at the expense of the majority. Which is why, as we embark on this business of transformation, these details are very, very important. Now, given this context, I'd like again to return to your engagement with the evidence leaders. You, in your engagement with evidence leader Mlombo, you indicated that your membership base is 15,000, and these are paid members, and they are individual members. The Prof then engaged you further on that, Prof Devereaux, and he questioned the numbers that you have provided in your website, which is 70,000. And we asked for a distinction between the 15,000 paid membership and the 70,000. I thought I was hearing you say the difference is the reach, that you've got 15,000 paid members, but you reach 70,000 farmers. Are you able to place for us on record the clarity in terms of the distinction between the 15,000 paid members and the 70,000 reach? Who are the reach, and in what ways do you monitor that reach? I'm an emerging farmer myself, and I practice permaculture principles. Now, would I be counted in that 70,000? And in what ways do you monitor that number?
So I think the 15,000 is stated by membership. And I think I clarified to say that is correct. And then I also said that the organization is also, the members is also, say, the maize industry. I asked the question, do you want to see that also as members, because the Grains SA is a member of Agri SA. Now, is his members then also a member of Agri SA? But I'd rather ask you a question. So you also know in farming, ma'am. I suppose then you utilize the roads where you farm. You utilize water. You utilize, if you go to a market, the free market system where you are. So
with respect, sir, our time is limited.
Yeah,
the question is, are you able to assist us in making a distinction between the 15,000 paid membership and the 70,000 reach? So what we are trying to understand is the relationship between these numbers, but also in what ways do you monitor and assess your reach as an organization?
So, ma'am, if we advocate for policy on water, I don't do it just for 15,000 people. I do it for you also, not even being a member. And I think that's the reach that we talk about. And my hope and our gain in Agri SA is to say, can we get to a point where we say, whatever we do it our uttermost for every farmer in South Africa. So membership-wise, 15,000, reach. My heart is, can we reach every farmer in South Africa? And when I advocate for policy on water, whatever I advocate, what goes for the commercial farmer, for the medium, the small, the large, should be in the same manner.
So the 70,000 is the general registered population of farmers in South Africa is 70,000. And by virtue of your advocacy work, you are saying when you advocate for access to water, it's not just for your members, it's for all of the farmers in South Africa. And that total number is 70,000. And that's how you get to the number 70,000.
No, ma'am. I didn't say 70,000 is the total number of farmers in South Africa, and that's what advocacy is all about. If I have a look at the membership of where we are, I need to go and have a look on how they calculated the 70. That would be where Grains SA, when you put everything together, you say, just in the community that we serve, which is membership, and you push up, that might be then the 70,000. So if I take the pig industry, if I take the grains industry, if I take the fruit industry, and you add up all their memberships, I think that's maybe where they got to their 70. But you ask me the question, what is our influence and where do we want to go to? I say I think we need to look at influence, and that's what I meant by saying if I advocate for water in South Africa, it's for everybody that utilize water being in farming.
Thank you, sir. I have not asked you what your influence is and where you want to go. The question was specifically a numbers question. I will, though, ask the question of influence later. Now, throughout your submission, you have presented food insecurity primarily as a consequence of poverty, as opposed to the design of our food system. And in your response, particularly to Dr. Carter, you indicated that access to food is about being able to buy food. So when one is unable to buy food, they are then unable to have access to their right to food. Now, if we can expand that, is it also your evidence that the structure of the food system, which includes land ownership patterns, production choices, value chains, export orientation, altogether play no independent role in the persistence of hunger? And if it does play a role, all of these components, what reforms would Agri-SA support in terms of all of these areas of the food chain?
And do you mind if I respond on that in writing to you? So
Yes.
It's nothing that I don't want to answer the question. It's just because I think there's meaningful evidence that we already participate in that. Just one comment on what you said. I think I can't agree more to you. Our food system needs to be transformed. We need to have transformation, ma'am, in our food system, because I think our food system should play a greater role in eradicating hunger and specifically food insecurity. I think it's a complex answer that needs to be given, and I would rather like to respond to that in writing, not shying away from it, but just also advocating and saying we are of the I would say the opinion as Agri-SA that we need to revamp our food system in South Africa. What I do want to say with that is based on data, based on evidence out of a food security index, then you would know how to revamp and transform your food system in South Africa.
Thank you very much. Would you agree that at the center of the transformation question is race? That one cannot, given the history of South Africa, think of transformation without thinking of race? And I'm asking this question because if you concede that Agri-SA has a role to play in transforming the food system, one would also need to understand, given your position, that you don't want to think about race in these things. You just want to think about farmers and producing food. Now, if you are interested in transformation, but not interested in race, in what ways are you able to play a meaningful role in transformation in the post-1994 South Africa?
I think you need to understand my heart because you want to push me into a space it feels. If you ask me who I am, ma'am, I'm a South African. I'm not denying that I'm white, so I do acknowledge race. I do go there. But, and I think I'm going to come back to it, I'm so passionate to be a farmer. And I don't walk away from being white and Afrikaans. But if you ask me a question today, and I think it's not fair to say that we walk away from race. All I said was, and I'm saying it again, as Agri-SA, I'm a South African. I'm a South African farmer. And farmers are the people that I work for, of which I acknowledge the race, and of which I do acknowledge our history, and of which I do acknowledge that there's transformation specifically to race that needs to happen.
Thank you, Sam. As you have been engaging the evidence leaders, I've also been taking notes, particularly verbatim notes. And I'd like to, at this point, quote you as open quote, as Agri-SA, we don't measure a farmer by being black or white or female or male. These are your words, that you don't identify your membership base on the basis of race. Given your testimony and submission that you do have a role to play in transformation, and given that one, not an Agri-SA member or the CEO of Agri-SA, anyone cannot think of transformation in the context of South Africa without thinking of race, how do we reconcile your statement that Agri-SA doesn't measure a farmer by race with the other statement that Agri-SA has an important role to play in the transformation project? And I'm not addressing you as an individual, so you as an Afrikaans man, in the way that you are responding. This is not an attack on you as an individual. This is a much bigger project of transformation in South Africa. And we are interested in Agri-SA and not you as an individual. Thank you so much.
I think because the focus is on farming, man. I think that's the short answer to it. And again, I'm going to say it. If we say that if we don't measure, I don't have a membership based on race. I have a membership based on farming. And I think if there's one thing that Agri-SA pushes to say, we have a role to play in farming, not walking away from race, not walking away from who we are. So it might be that my understanding of stating that Agri-SA does not qualify somebody according to race, it doesn't mean I didn't acknowledge it. It doesn't mean that I didn't buy into and didn't play into transformation being gender or race specific. That's not what I meant. I think the meaning of what I said was, and I think that's where it comes in, I'm a farmer. I want to farm. And there are so many people being like that, black and white. And it does mean that if we look into transformation, and the definition I gave is that we're not fit for the times that we are in, gender is for sure in that package.
No, thank you, sir. We appreciate that response and the sincerity with which you are engaging. We note and appreciate it. Now, given your commitment to transformation, and given that you have a membership base that you are able to identify your members, can you commit to, even as supplementary submissions, give us your demographics, your racial demographics and your gender demographics? Out of the 15,000, how many of these are African and how many of these are not African or white or Indian or colored, and all of the other demographic groups that are represented in democratic South Africa?
I told you I don't know. I do not know. As I sit here, I can't tell you how many white, black, and yellow I have.
No, we appreciate that you don't know now. But given that your membership is paid, so you have a name and a surname, and you are able to communicate with your membership base, are you able to provide that information? If you don't have it, then to source it from your membership base so that we are able to, at the end of this exercise, get a sense of how many of the 15,000 members of Agri-SA fall into these racial categories and gender categories and other categories as mentioned by Commissioner Kwinana. Can you please speak to the mic?
I will do my uttermost to get you the data.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Now, moving on, in your response again to the evidence leaders, you indicate, and I quote you once again, open quote, "We are the custodians of the resources before us through whatever means they are obtained," close quote. Given that the main resource of the farming industry is land, then one would superimpose that submission to say we are the custodians of land through whatever means we obtain them. And we've already agreed that given the political history of South Africa, the apartheid government provided dispossessed land to the minority, which were white, then one could read the statement to imply that farmers who are the custodians of land, through whatever means that they receive them, have a responsibility to that land. Now, given your understanding then of food being about the ability to buy, the Commission is interested in your position on the relationship between access to land on the one hand and access to food on the other hand, and more generally the position of Agri-SA on land reform and the right of people and communities to grow their own food and, of course, as a result, then attain access to food. Are you able to assist us with your position as Agri-SA on that?
Chair, yes. It's a double-barreled question, not an easy one at all. So access to land is an ongoing debate. It's one of the centers of excellence within Agri-SA with which we engage continuously. Land reform is a high priority within Agri-SA, and we understand and appreciate the political difficulty of the land question in South Africa altogether. What we want, and what Jan Kutse is getting to, is we want to focus on agriculture as a concept, as food production for the country. We don't want to get into the politics, but we're not blind to it. We're not insensitive to it at all. So we continuously engage with all the initiatives by government in parliamentary processes, with legislation, with and lots of legislation in that regard, not only from the Department of Agriculture, but also the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development, on legislation to make sure that we're a rules-based, constitutionally founded response to how the land issue is addressed in a measured, sensitive way, the way that we obviously understand it needs to be done in South Africa. So there's an absolute commitment to understanding the land issue. I think we've spoken enough about the relationship between access to land, or between farming and that right to sufficient food. This is the reason for the existence of Agri-SA, is to ensure that our country remains food secure to the degree that it can, with all the challenges that we have as far as access to those food resources are concerned. So that is the reason that we do. And we don't have simple answers or straightforward answers sometimes to many of the questions that we'd like to. Obviously, these are challenging questions that we have to keep on engaging with each other upon. But we're in this space to ensure that those positions are maintained, and to not maintained in any untoward sense, but to ensure that the rule of law-based approach throughout this constitutional project and adventure that we're on is adhered to, and that we follow and stay in step with that. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you, and I appreciate that so much. Now, to follow up, before I go to my second to last question, and I quote you, Mr. Kotsia, once again, open quote. The greatest fear we have as farmers is that people would not be able to buy our food because of poverty, close quote. I'm following up with this in relation to the response and the question on land reform and access to land, because it goes without saying that if people have land and they have an ability to grow their own food, then your fear will be realized, right? Because then they will not be able to buy your food because they are able to grow their own land. What is your comment on that?
And we export 50% of our food. So your comment is then out of context. So the take is just, what I meant by the greatest fear I have is, why do I live? Why do I have passion for what I do? I produce food. I'm passionate about producing food. If I'm a maize farmer, I'm passionate about producing maize. Poverty is not something just prone to South Africa. Poverty is prone to our neighboring communities, our neighboring countries. It's prone to Africa. And the moment that we don't deal with that, my fear is, for what are we going to live? Why are we here? Why do we produce food? So it's not just prone to South Africa. and then to counter also to what you said of your understanding and out of context, then in my mind is, I said to you, ma'am, we need to grow agriculture organically. We need to have more farmers. We cannot just have the farmers we have. We cannot just utilize the land that we utilize now. More land, unproductive land, needs to be utilized and turned into a productive system, which is part of this food system. And it's part of transformation. It's part of the whole context of transformation, is what you explained. So I think it's out of context to say, if we give land, and land is given to what farmer you want to give it to, all of a sudden my fear is going to come through because they're going to produce their own food. I don't believe so. I think it's far greater than that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Then to my second to last question, which then follows on your response around export. So you export 50% of your food, so 50% stays in. Now, if South Africa exports the significant volume of not just food, nutritious food, while millions in South Africa cannot afford healthy diets, should export success ever be weighed against domestic food security? In other words, does Agri-SA believe there are circumstances in which domestic food needs should take precedence over export markets?
Not at all, ma'am. I think it complements each other. So the way agriculture develops and developed in South Africa is through the exports that we did. So how do you develop rural economies in what we need to produce? So exports is one of the channels that we have to maintain money, that you bring money back into. So I think the relationship you try to, or you explain to, is not in the context as what we understand it as farmers. Wherever we live and wherever we create an economy, you're actually uplifting and you get people out of poverty. If I'm a farmer and I live in a small town like, say, Uniondale, the capacity for people to buy all my produce is just not there. The natural resources are situated in Uniondale. What do? I export. In the past, we exported to George, which is a town nearby, because they were urbanized. Even that is saturated. Even that is for some of the produce that we do. We take that high value produce out and we take it out of the country and sell it. And then you bring back that economy into Uniondale. Didn't I contribute to the social economic activity of Uniondale? I think we did as farmers, ma'am.
No, thank you, Mr. Kutsia. This is my last question, and again, Council, it's a double barrel question. So perhaps you might just note so that you respond for both sides of this question. Given that your main reason for existence is food security, as you've stated, I was very interested, and I am, in the proactive measures that Agri-SA believes commercial agriculture should undertake to improve food affordability, particularly for farm workers. In your response to one of the evidence leaders, you have covered this question by indicating that by the very virtue of providing employment and in some instances providing housing, you are contributing to livelihoods and therefore by implication their ability to be able to access food. A follow-up to that then is whether Agri-SA monitors whether farm workers themselves experience food security. You produce the food index. So you have research and monitoring capacity. And within that monitoring capacity, do you have capacity to monitor the quality of the life of farm workers, particularly their access to food? And what percentage of farm workers earn enough to be able to afford the National Nutritious Food Basket? You spoke about the food basket earlier. So that is the question.
Chair, sorry for the deliberation. This is a very difficult question to ask. I think it would be wonderful to know whether there's food strain or food security strain for each and every individual farm worker in South Africa. But I think the facts speak for themselves to a degree, and I'm sure there might be grey areas in my mind or my own thinking about this. But the fact that the agricultural sector increased in the last financial year, 950,000 farm workers, up from the average over the past 5 years, which is around 733,000, I think seems to indicate to me that those jobs are sustainable to the degree that they can provide the livelihoods for the people that work there. I also need to say this. I think there's no farmer in South Africa that wants his farm worker not to be able to arrive at work and to do the job that he needs to do, coming to work with an empty stomach. I think, that if that is where the question is going to, it would be wonderful. I don't think we have that information. It might be a good suggestion for us to follow up on that. But the indicators seem to me to think that this is a sector that is, at least from an employment point of view, and probably the only one in South Africa where there's growth, which seems to indicate to me that our farmers and our farm workers are benefiting from what it is that is being done. I don't know how to answer that better, and maybe Mr. Kutsia might be able to amplify that. But it's an interesting and a good question, valid question, obviously, to ask whether our farm workers, measure up to what we regard as food secure. We also, obviously, there's context also that needs to be taken into account. Lots of the farm workers reside on the farms, and they have those services that are provided through the farm to them to also enable them to have that. And this I have to say with conviction, have that dignified work to be able to continue and to thrive within the sector that we love in particular. Making sure that those contributions that are not only related to the wage that he receives is also taken into account, the housing element, the transportation elements, all those extra things that are also included within the space. Again, this is a question that a person can keep on answering and responding to, but it's a valid question and a good question to ask whether this is something that needs to be factored into our calculations with respect to food security of farm workers.
I assume Mr. Kutsia doesn't have any additions, which is fine. My last question, Chair, as a follow-up, you do mention that most of the farm workers live on the farm and some don't. This question is more interested in those who live on the farms. Yesterday, we had the Minister of Land, Rural Development and Land Reform sitting exactly where you are sitting, Council. And we asked him this question. In February 2025, he announced a moratorium on farm evictions. And later in the year, he announced that he was obtaining a legal opinion on this moratorium. Given that you represent farmers who would be responsible for evictions, particularly in relation to employment contracts and other tenure relationships, what is the position of Agri SA on a moratorium on farm evictions?
Again, a triple barrel question. I can't fathom why a moratorium on farm evictions, unqualified, would seem to be necessarily a good thing. I think it's a very difficult question. Obviously, there might be reasons why evictions might be necessary, including that the people that are living in this particular area might not be safe or have the right accommodation, or whatever the circumstances might be. So it's a highly nuanced question, Chair, and I'm not sure whether Agri SA And obviously, we're an organization that works through mandates, from our representative structures, whether it has a position on whether moratorium should be extended or lifted altogether. But it's a nuanced question. It's not a simple one in that regard. Again, the law is what it is. We have a strongly enforced constitutional right to property, to dignity, to all the rights that are enshrined, in the Constitution that protect unlawful evictions and such. And Agri-SA will never defend the unlawful or the illegal actions of any farmer in South Africa. So I think as far as that is concerned, I think that's probably the lawyer answer that I can give to you at this stage. But I don't think that Agri-SA has a mandate with respect to the lifting of moratoriums of evictions at all. I don't think that's something that comes up. What I can say, though, is that it's a fundamental issue within South Africa, within Agri-SA's ranks, is about the dignity of everybody who contributes to food security in South Africa, including in particular the farm workers.
Thank you so much for closing with that response. The dignity of everyone who contributes to food security in the country. And we all know that the biggest contributors are not necessarily the farmers, but the farm workers who toil the land, many of whom, for various reasons, are evicted from the land, many whom would have known it to be home for their lifetimes. The South African Human Rights Commission monitors instances of farm evictions, and there are multiple testimonies of elderly people and other people who have spent all of their lives. You are a rural citizen, Mr. Kutsia. You understand the difference between living in a rural area and living in an urban area. I was going to say informal settlement, but I don't think you know what it means to live in an informal settlement. Many of these people are moved from the rural landscape to utter squalor in informal settlements. The psychological, spiritual implications are indescribable. The question, therefore, would be, would you assist us, because we see you as assisting us in the project of transformation, given your commitment to also then interest yourself in this project of transformation? Would you further assist us through your membership base to develop a position paper of Agri-SA on farm evictions, qualified or unqualified? The position paper can even, with of course the advice of counsel, name the instances, the qualified instances where farm evictions there can be a moratorium or not. But would you assist the project of transformation with a position paper on farm evictions? And that's my last question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We've had you for a minute and a half. I would have loved to engage on other issues, but questions or issues about why the South African consumer does not want to eat that apple that just has that one blemish, but I think we'll take it to another day. Thank you so much. In respect of the supplementary submissions, we will request that same be submitted on the 24th of July, 2026. The position paper, noting that it may require significant work from yourselves, may I ask counsel, in terms of your own anticipation, when can you submit same to the commission?
Chair, if the deadline is the 24th of July of this year, then we'll endeavour to get it to you by the 24th of July. And if we can't, then we'll tell you why. We won't be closed about it at all. Some of these are difficult questions, obviously, and they're very often data-driven. And if we don't have that information, we're simply going to have to qualify our responses in that regard. But we commit to that date if that is the instruction.
Thank you so much. And when you do have a please invite the Commission to have a monitoring exercise at one of these farms in terms of the Good Samaritan initiative so that we can walk and understand what it looks like. Monitoring in farms is quite close to the Commission's heart in terms of ensuring that food security holistically looks like food security. Thank you so much. We are having lunch. It's 1 o'clock. It's actually after 1. It's 2 o'clock. Can we have lunch? That concludes day 3 of the second leg of the inquiry. Ladies and gentlemen, there's food this side that has been waiting. I will invite our farmers as well to also sample some of the food. As they say, they always want to sample